Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we'll be setting sail in the highly requested Tier 6 German destroyer known as the Gaede, in a Tier 8 dominated domination game on the map Haven. The purpose of today's gameplay is for us to articulate our usage of corners in destroyers in order to effectively take out enemy ships either in an aggressive or a defensive manner. And as we go into that discussion, we'll also be talking about the strengths and weaknesses of the Gaede and our current experience, and just providing some general statistics on the ship. But first, our game plan. We're going to try and make our way towards Objective Charlie and take it. But the problem is, with our 36 knots top speed as standard, we're going to need to use our speed boost to remain competitive in getting to the objective, assuming that the enemy destroyers will not be using their own speed boost consumables to outrun us to the objective. It's a gamble, but one we're willing to take. Now, going towards Charlie, things are going to go south very shortly, because what's actually going to happen is an enemy ship is going to detect us using the radio locator skill. There we go. Now at this point, we don't know what has it, but we have to assume the worst case scenario. An enemy destroyer has it, and that enemy destroyer also has a concealment build. And based on the 3 enemy destroyers that we're going up against, all with roughly the same detectabilities as standard as our own ship, whereby our detectability by sea is 7.3 kilometers, average for our tier at best. If they've got a full concealment build plus this skill, they'll be able to detect us well before we detect them, and they can use the radio locator to anticipate where to fire their torpedoes in order to try and hit us. So therefore, we're not going to be too aggressive into Charlie. We're going to deflect northeast to the objective and play around the landmass that occupies the region off to the northeast of Charlie, and we'll start to play the corner. Now, throughout this game, I'm going to be trying to figure out which ship has radio locator. And over time, what we're going to note straight away is it can't be an enemy destroyer that goes into Charlie. It'll be a mass that goes into Charlie. And the reason we know it can't be is because our friendly mass also goes into that objective and ends up being a lot closer to the enemy mass. On top of that, the Akatsuki that appears north of Charlie shortly can't have radio locator because they're roughly a little bit closer to the enemy mass in our experience. Or at least we thought that was the case. But coming around to the corner play then. As we approach the corner, we're getting ready to use our Hydroacoustic Consumable, whereby this is the first of the German destroyers that gets it, and it paints the unique flavour of the German destroyers. We detect torpedoes at approximately 2.82 kilometers and enemy ships at 3.96 kilometers, which is very nice. And it means that as we come up to the corner, we deploy our hydro and we can see what's coming. And we'll know straight away if an enemy destroyer is north of this corner, whether they'll be there or not, and whether they'll have a radio locator, because if they did, we would expect them to throw torpedoes around the corner. But none have been spotted. But what does take us by surprise is an enemy York really pushing hard towards this position. And what we're going to use is our smoke in order to bait that York to come towards us, throwing in some torpedoes as well. Now what's the logic behind this? The York was bow on and heading full speed towards the corner. The torpedoes constrict the York to go bow on towards the corner still, because if they turn broadside, they're going to take the torpedoes. And on top of that, because we laid up our smoke, the York's probably going to think, well, that Gaede is just going to sit in its smoke and I can detect it using the Hydroacoustic Consumable. Well, we've anticipated that. We're already reversing back around the corner and we'll see the Hydroacoustic get switched on by the York. And as they open fire with their 210mm main artillery batteries, they're going to miss and we're safely back behind cover. Perfect timing. And with that York having pushed so aggressively towards our smoke screen and towards the corner now, they are in a bit of a pickle because they've got to deal with our Bismarck, Nürnberg and Scharnhorst all coming up this way. And what that means is that York's pushed a little bit too far and they're going to end up having to turn back in towards the landmass off to our left hand side, and therefore they'll be on the other side of it. And in doing so, note how on the minimap they've actually cut off the path of their friendly Akatsuki, who may have been wanting to fire off all 3 sets of their triple torpedo tubes towards our battleships. And this means that we've actually blunted the ability for the enemy team to get off torpedoes around the corner. Now we very briefly spot the torpedoes coming from the York using our Hydroacoustic, and we can see that there's 2 triple set, and because they originated quite close to the York, we'd assume they've got to be York torpedoes. So now what we're waiting for is 3 sets of 3 torpedoes to come round the corner from the enemy Akatsuki. Now our Hydro's out, but we're assuming that our friendly Bismarck has laid up its Hydro, which will extend to the corner and provide ample coverage. And we'll see very shortly 1 set does get spotted as we inch towards the corner and the enemy York's Hydro runs out. There's 1 set. We're waiting for the next set, hoping it's going to arrive. There we go, that's the 2nd set, and a smoke screen has been laid up, so the Akatsuki's probably sitting it, and those torpedoes that are coming look to be coming from the enemy Prinz Eugen, whereby they're almost out of range already. and we push the corner here using our reloaded torpedoes to tear apart the enemy York, anticipating the torpedoes coming from the other side of their ship, from their starboard side, dodging them accordingly by dropping off our speed, and we finish off that York for our first kill. And now we see a third set of 3 torpedoes come from the smoke screen. That means the Akatsuki's out of torpedoes for at least, let's say, the next 30 seconds. Let's tear them to pieces with our 4 single-firing 150mm artillery batteries, which do a very good job at cutting apart opposing destroyers. We open fire, that's 3,000 health off in the first salvo, plus 2 incapacitations, and in return the Akatsuki does a very good job at hitting us, whereby we absorb a lot of damage there. But now we deflect behind the Akatsuki to prey on their rather poor turret traverse, but there's no need because our friendly mass detonates the Akatsuki. And at this point we decide to reverse back into the smoke screen that the enemy Akatsuki has provided us with in order to hide from the enemy Prinz Eugen, who's being a little bit too effective here, really landing some good shots in with their high explosive. Now note here we have 18,600 health. We are playing this ship fully upgraded and with Survivability Expert, and it goes rather nicely because this ship as standard gets 16,500 health. Survivability Expert kicks this all the way up to the number just described, and that means you can really tank damage in this ship, and your rather long reload isn't as much of a problem in the knife fight, i.e. close range fighting against enemy destroyers. And we're not even down to half health yet. And now that radiolocator has disappeared off us, we know which ship had it, and it was the enemy Prinz Eugen, because the mass on our team, which is south of the Prinz Eugen relative to us, is just that tiny bit closer, and we know it's switched on to them, or we think it has, because any other ship that would have radiolocator apart from the enemy Bismarck right now would be pointing it towards our HSF Harakazi, the destroyer that's just coming out of Charlie and going west of it. That's how we can tell, or at least that's our thinking process. Now we would like to guard the Prinz Eugen, we would love to torpedo that AFK or disconnected Bismarck, but is it really worth it in the grand scheme of things when our teammates can deal with that and instead we can go take Alpha and help secure our team's points advantage? We want to always keep our mind on the objective, and that's why we're doing so. As we make our way over, using our speed boost once again to offset our rather poor top speed, let's talk a little bit about the Gaede's torpedoes. Now you get 2 quadruple set and they're very nice torpedoes. The only downside is the very long reload of 90 seconds, which if I remember correctly is one of the longest if not the longest reload for destroyers at tier 6. As a result, your torpedoes have that downside, but on the positive side, they've got a 65 knot top speed, they've got an 8 km range, and they do a maximum damage of 13,700 per torpedo. And if we add to that the 1.3 km detectability of these torpedoes by standard, they're very nice torpedoes to have. They're a welcome addition to this ship. Conversely with the artillery pieces, they're a nice caliber, 150mm, and that's what makes this ship unique, whereby this is one of the few destroyers in game which does not benefit from basic firing training, or indeed advanced firing training on its main artillery pieces. On top of that, one has to consider that these guns pack a whopping punch. 2,200 maximum damage of high explosive and 3,700 maximum damage of armour piercing. And what with it being German armour piercing, if you get a ship on full broadside you'll do a good amount of damage, and even Citadel cruisers. But you also have to keep in mind that your 835 meters per second muzzle velocity that's standard to both your shells is really felt when you're firing your armour piercing shells, whereby the drag on those shells is rather significant and more than the high explosive shells, which aren't too bad even at the longer ranges out to your maximum range of 10.9 kilometers. And one other thing to think about is your maximum dispersion at max range is 90 meters, meaning these guns are rather accurate. You just have to get to grips with the long reload, the drag on the armour piercing shells, and one glaring issue with the turrets, that is their rather long turret traverse time of 22.5 seconds to turn 180 degrees. And it's finally confirmed to us that the Prinz Eugen's got to have a radiolocator because we're the closest ship to them. Meanwhile, all the ships down in the south on the enemy team around the Bravo objective are a lot closer to our fleet in Charlie. So that's the nail in the coffin in terms of knowing which ship's got that skill. Now as we finish off capturing Alpha at this point, let's make our way towards the enemy Bismarck. And once again, we're going to play around a landmass and play corners here. Because what we're expecting is that Bismarck's a bit wary of what could potentially have just captured Alpha from their perspective. They probably think it's a destroyer. So as a result, we're just going to antagonise them a little bit. We're not going to be aggressive because the number of secondaries they have and their propensity for potentially turning their guns towards us and scoring some nasty hits with armour piercing. You have to keep in mind the Gaede is quite a wide ship and quite a deep ship in general in terms of its profile. And with 16mm of armour all round as well, it's susceptible to taking penetrations from armour piercing shells, even from the likes of battleships. We can't really afford to get hit that hard. So instead we're using our 12% fire chance on our high explosives shells, and yep, that's right, 12%. I was quite shocked myself when I first heard of it, and that's without Demolition Expert, to go to the Bismarck into coming forward. Now they may come our way, which if so, we can just reverse around the corner and always keep a bit of landmass between us and them, even if they flip on the Hydroacoustic. But instead, what we've done, as they gradually lose some health through burning, we're hopefully going to cause that fire to gradually continue to bleed out their health, and they may even use their extinguisher, and it appears as though they did turn broadside to our North Carolina, perhaps in fear of us shooting at them, and as a result our North Carolina was able to score at least one citadel we saw there, perhaps multiple. And now as we reverse and the Bismarck's using its Hydroacoustic, they're in two mindsets. Do they deal with us or do they deal with our North Carolina? With the North Carolina, our team of course, being the greater threat as they finish off our Chapayev via the enemy Bismarck. Now as we're waiting on the corner here, we decide to throw our torpedoes down. Our North Carolina is going to finish off the Bismarck, but that was for the purposes of trying to hit the Bismarck if they kept going forward to pursue our North Carolina. But now we've got a more significant and more manageable threat, and that's the enemy Ognovoy. Now what you'll notice, we've used up our torpedoes, so we can't use those to beat the Ognovoy, but we wouldn't really intend to. Instead, we're going to push into Bravo and try to catch that Ognovoy off guard as they try to perhaps retreat into Bravo. And notice how early we switched on our Hydroacoustic here. We want to come around this corner knowing there's no torpedoes to ambush us, and we can go toe to toe with that enemy destroyer that's wounded, at least compared to our own ship. And in doing so, we're going to catch them here and we'll finish them off. Keeping an eye ahead to make sure no torpedoes are seen as they gradually turn their guns towards us, and we knock off 1,300 health with 2 shells there. We're throwing another salvo. We're absorbing the hits quite nicely by comparison, but their health is fading away rather rapidly. And notice the reload differential here, and that's why having the health pool that we have allows us to offset the superior fire rate of the Ognovoy. We finish off that enemy destroyer for our second kill, and we turn towards the Ognovoy's sinking wreck at this point to make sure if they did get off any torpedoes at the last possible moment, we're ready to dodge them. And at the same time, that means we turn into Bravo now, and we can take this objective, making it 2 caps. And this game's pretty much over now in terms of our involvement, and we'll just wrap up this objective. So it hasn't been too bad of a game really, and are there any other things we should talk about in terms of the Gaede, in terms of its statistics, strengths and weaknesses? Well, we pretty much covered everything. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that this is not the most manoeuvrable ship, and hopefully that has been articulated in some of our sweeping turns, whereby you have a 3.2 second rudder shift after you've mounted the rudder module upgrade. And that means that by standard you haven't got the best rudder shift, you've got quite a long time one, and on top of that, our turn circle radius is 690 meters. That's worse than some cruisers at your tier, which means that if anything, this is probably one of the weakest destroyers at its tier for manoeuvrability. And it's something that you have to manage, and that's why whilst we've been playing close to land masses and around corners, we haven't been playing right on the corners unless we felt safe. i.e. keeping a little bit of distance between us and land to make sure we don't ground ourselves, unlike the York towards the start of the game. But other than that, it's a very nice ship, and it is a nice step up from the T-22 that precedes it. Although I did enjoy the T-22, and if you want to know more, be sure to use the link in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now. Here we can see the low firing arcs of our 150mm cannon, a German tradition, as we found on the cruisers. So we can't get any more hits in the turpits, and the game is about to end. Time to take a look at the post-game stats. A rather simple game in the end. We can see that our battle performance consisted of 48,880 HP of damage, whereby we scored 25 target hits to our main batteries, 3 torpedo hits, 5 incapacitations, 2 enemy ships destroyed, 1 fire caused, 3 floods caused, and 2 flags captured. And we also picked up the standard achievement of a devastating strike, whereby you have to destroy an enemy ship with a single artillery salvo, torpedo salvo, or aircraft by causing damage to over 50% of the destroyed ship's normal health pool, whereby we notched that up on the enemy York. Looking at the team scores, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base XP earned by a small margin, picking up 1,862. Our overall role in this game was to assist in leading our team's charge counterclockwise around the map, starting off at Charlie, then moving to Alpha and finalising at Bravo. And note the small amount of continuity here with our previous gameplay, whereby we featured the Gallant, link available in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now, whereby we had a plan A, which was to push Charlie, and when that failed or we came up against potential resistance, we defected into plan Bravo, which was to play the northeastern corner around Charlie, and it worked rather well. Looking at our detailed report, we have 2 key items to note here, both in the team play category. Firstly, the number of torpedoes we spotted, 25, whereby our position up on that northeastern corner worked very well in combination with our hydroacoustic search and then just by our presence being close enough to detect the torpedoes in finding those torpedoes and alerting our team to their presence early on, perhaps preventing some torpedoes hitting their mark. On top of that, we also had to consider that we notched up half of our team's overall capture point tally, whereby we took 2 objectives by ourselves entirely. And finally, coming on to credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, we walked away with 201,799 silver credits and 5,028 experience for our captain. To conclude, hopefully today we have demonstrated how one in their destroyer can use corners rather effectively in both a defensive and offensive manner in order to cause issues for the enemy team. Focusing in particular on our first corner play, we saw how we used the corner defensively to bait an enemy York onto our ships and bait them into grounding their ship against a landmass. At which point, once we used our Hydroacoustic Consumable and our position in order to spot the incoming enemy torpedoes, and we timed it right to know when the enemy torpedoes had been exhausted, we could make our play, take out the York and push down on the enemy Akatsuki, switching from the defensive to the offensive and allowing our team's momentum to build as a result. And by using corners in that manner, you can very quickly cause the enemy team to become frightful of pushing forward, because as they come up to a landmass, they'll be worried about what lies around the corner. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships gameplays on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.